Hey there, travelers. Before we dive into today's story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from. Now let's begin our journey into the unknown. I've seen things that would make most people question their sanity. 23 years with the FBI, the last 8 with Division P7, the department that doesn't officially exist. We handle cases that regular agents file under unexplained phenomena and forget about. But what happened in Interrogation Room C on that November morning in Denver still haunts my dreams. My name is Dermot Boyer, and I'm about to tell you something that will change how you see the world. The suspect's name was John Bell. 34 years old, accountant from Lakewood. For 6 months, he'd been carving symbols into his victims' foreheads before strangling them. 7 bodies, all found with the same ancient markings that our linguistics expert couldn't identify. When we finally cornered him outside a coffee shop on Colfax Avenue, he came quietly. Too quietly. "Agent Boyer, you sure you want to do this?" Detective Kristen Gerard, my partner, adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses nervously. She'd transferred to P7 just 3 months ago, still skeptical about our cases. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the observation room. Through the one-way mirror, Bell sat perfectly still. His hands were cuffed to the metal table, but he wasn't trying to escape. Instead, he stared directly at the mirror as if he could see us watching. His lips moved silently, forming words in a language that made my skin crawl. "He keeps saying the same thing," I told Kristen, checking my notes. "Claims a demon named Antrim chose him. Says he had no control over the killings." "Mental illness," Kristen replied flatly. "Dissociative identity disorder, maybe schizophrenia. We've seen it before." I wished she was right. God, how I wished she was right. The temperature in the interrogation room had dropped 15 degrees since we'd brought Bell in. Our equipment registered the change, but maintenance insisted the HVAC system was functioning normally. Ice crystals had begun forming on the metal table around his handcuffs. "Let's go," I said, straightening my tie. "Time to get some answers." The moment we entered the room, I knew something was wrong. The air felt thick, oppressive, like breathing through wet concrete. Bell's eyes tracked our movement with predatory precision. When he smiled, I noticed his teeth had yellowed since booking. "John Bell," I began, sitting across from him. "You've been read your rights. Do you understand why you're here?" "Of course." His voice was calm, almost conversational. 7 souls delivered to my master. 7 doorways opened. The ritual is nearly complete. Kristen set down her recorder and notepad. "Mr. Bell, let's start simple. Where were you on October 15th between 8 and 11 p.m.? Bell tilted his head, studying her with unnerving intensity. "Beautiful Detective Gerard, you smell of doubt and fear, but mostly loneliness." "Answer the question," I interrupted. "October 15th. I was in the basement of 1247 Morrison Street," he said matter-of-factly, "preparing Margaret Chen for her journey. She fought beautifully, screamed my master's name as I carved his sigil into her flesh." Kristen's pen trembled slightly. Margaret Chen was victim number 3. We'd never released details about the basement location. "How do you know Detective Gerard's personal life?" I pressed. "Have you been watching us?" Bell laughed, a sound like wind through dead leaves. "I know she goes home to an empty apartment every night. I know she takes pills to sleep because the nightmares won't stop. I know she hasn't spoken to her sister in 2 years because of what happened to little Emma." The color drained from Kristen's face. Emma was her niece, killed in a car accident. Information that wasn't in any file. "Stop," she whispered. "And you, Agent Boyer." Bell turned those predatory eyes on me. "The great hunter of monsters. But what monster hunts you?" My throat went dry. "What do you mean?" "The shadow growing in your belly. The doctor's words echoing in your mind. 6 months, maybe less." "You haven't told anyone, have you? Not even beautiful Kristen here." The room seemed to spin. My cancer diagnosis was confidential. I'd told no one except Dr. Richardson and my ex-wife during our divorce proceedings. Kristen stared at me in shock, her mouth opening and closing wordlessly. "How?" I managed to croak. "Because I am not John Bell," he said, leaning forward. The handcuffs groaned against the table. John Bell died 3 nights ago when he accepted my gift. When he said yes to the cure I offered. You're lying, Kristen found her voice. Kristen, we have your fingerprints, your DNA, from this borrowed flesh, yes. But I am Antrim, herald of the great hunger, shepherd of desperate souls. His voice began to change, deepening, taking on harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat. And soon, Agent Boyer, you'll be desperate enough to accept what I offer. The lights flickered. The temperature plummeted further, our breath now visible in the suddenly frigid air. Tell us about the other victims, I demanded, fighting to maintain control. How did you choose them? Choose? Bell's head tilted unnaturally far to the left. I didn't choose them. They chose me. Each one came to the healer first, seeking salvation from their suffering. Cancer, like yours. Heart disease, genetic disorders, all terminal, all desperate. What healer? Kristen leaned forward, her professional instincts overriding her fear. The one who offers miracles to those the world has abandoned. Father Matthias, they call him. He operates from the old church in the mountains above Cedar Falls. So many pilgrims make that journey. So many leave changed. Bell's eyes rolled back, showing only whites. When he spoke again, his voice was a chorus of whispers. But the miracles come with a price. To be healed, you must say yes. You must accept us into your flesh, your soul. Most resist at first, but pain makes believers of us all. You're insane, Kristen said, but her voice shook. Am I? Bell's head snapped toward her with inhuman speed. Tell me, Detective Gerard, what would you give to have one more conversation with little Emma? To tell her you're sorry you weren't there that night? Tears streamed down Kristen's face. Stop. Please. And you, dying man, Bell fixed me with those terrible eyes. What would you sacrifice for another year? Another decade? Your morality? Your soul? That's when the screaming started. Bell's mouth opened wider than humanly possible, unleashing a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep underground. The one-way mirror cracked. Kristen stumbled backward, her hands covering her ears. His skin began to bubble and melt, starting at his forehead and spreading downward like heated wax. The smell hit us next, sulfur mixed with burning flesh and something else, something ancient and corrupt. Black liquid poured from his eye sockets as his features dissolved. The harvest has begun. The thing that had been Bell gurgled through dissolving vocal cords. The healer awakens the desperate, the hungry, the dying. Come to Cedar Falls, Agent Boyer. Come and be saved. Kristen was screaming now, but I couldn't move. Couldn't look away as the man literally liquefied before our eyes. In seconds, nothing remained but a puddle of black, steaming sludge where John Bell had been sitting. The handcuffs clattered to the floor, still locked. The silence that followed was deafening. Kristen had backed against the wall, her face pale with shock. I stood frozen, staring at the impossible scene before us. Dermont, she whispered, what the hell just happened? And why didn't you tell me about the cancer? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Denver PD. Another body had been found, killed the same way, same symbols, same ritual timing. But this victim had died 3 hours ago, 2 hours after John Bell had melted in our interrogation room. The nightmare was just beginning, and something told me that Entity's final words weren't a threat. They were an invitation. Somewhere in the mountains above Cedar Falls, a healer was collecting the desperate, and I was apparently next on the list. I looked at my reflection in the cracked mirror, seeing the truth I'd been hiding from everyone, including myself. The cancer was winning, eating me alive from the inside. And now something else knew it too. Something that wanted to help. The drive to Cedar Falls took us through winding mountain roads that seemed to twist deeper into darkness with every mile. Kristen hadn't spoken much since the interrogation room incident 3 days ago. She'd requested a transfer twice, but I convinced her to stay. I needed someone I could trust, and despite everything, she was the best partner I'd ever had. You should have told me about the cancer, she finally said, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Would it have changed anything? I stared out at the towering pines that blocked most of the afternoon sun. The job's the job, Kristen. People are dying. It changes everything, she snapped. That thing knew about us, Dermont. Our secrets, our pain. What if it's targeting you specifically? I'd been wondering the same thing. Dr. Richardson had given me 6 months, but I could feel the disease spreading faster now. The pain pills weren't helping anymore, and I'd started losing weight despite forcing myself to eat. Contact the local sheriff, I said, changing the subject. I want to know everything about this Father Matthias and his church. Cedar Falls was a town that time forgot. Population 847, according to the weathered sign at the city limits. Main Street consisted of a general store, a diner, a gas station, and not much else. The sheriff's office was a small brick building wedged between the post office and a barber shop that looked like it hadn't opened since the 1970s. Sheriff Ted Wishaw was a mountain of a man with calloused hands and suspicious eyes. He looked like he'd rather be hunting elk than talking to federal agents. Father Matthias? He leaned back in his creaky chair. Been running that old church for about 3 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, except when the pilgrims come through. Pilgrims? Kristen pulled out her notepad. Sick folks, mostly. Word got out that he can perform miracles, heal the incurable. We get maybe 20-30 people a month making the trek up to St. Bartholomew's. And do they get healed? I asked. Hendricks shifted uncomfortably. Some do. Saw it myself. Cancer patients walking out of there looking 20 years younger. But others... He trailed off. Others what? Others come back different. Changed. Like something's wrong behind their eyes. My deputy Owen drove one of them down the mountain last month. Woman named Drew Gleason. She'd been dying of liver cancer, came up here as a last resort. When she left, she was physically healthy, but she kept talking to someone who wasn't there, arguing with voices only she could hear. Kristen and I exchanged glances. Where is Drew Gleason now? Psychiatric ward in Boulder. Killed 3 nurses with her bare hands before they could sedate her. Kept screaming about the hunger and feeding the master. My stomach dropped. Can you give us directions to the church? I can, but I wouldn't recommend going up there after dark. Road's treacherous and... Wishaw hesitated. Strange things happen on that mountain at night. The drive up the mountain was harrowing. The narrow road switchbacked through dense forest, with steep drops on one side and sheer rock faces on the other. As the sun disappeared behind the peaks, shadows seemed to reach out from between the trees like grasping fingers. St. Bartholomew's sat on a plateau about halfway up the mountain. The church itself was old, maybe dating back to the 1800s, with a tall bell tower and Gothic windows. But something felt wrong about the whole place. The architecture was subtly off, as if designed by someone who'd never actually seen a real church. There, Kristen pointed to a figure moving between the headstones of the small cemetery beside the church. Someone's out there. We approached carefully, hands near our weapons. The figure was a woman, maybe 50 years old, kneeling beside a fresh grave. She was talking quietly to the headstone, her voice carrying on the cold mountain air. "Excuse me, ma'am," I called out. "FBI, could we speak with you?" She turned slowly and my breath caught. The woman was beautiful in an unsettling way, too perfect, too symmetrical. Her skin had an almost luminous quality in the moonlight, and her eyes reflected light like an animal's. "Federal agents," she said, her voice melodic but wrong somehow. "You're here about the miracles." "We're investigating some deaths that may be connected to this church," Kristen said carefully. "Could you tell us your name?" "I was Michelle Pingay, cancer patient, terminal diagnosis, 6 weeks to live." She smiled, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp. "That was 4 months ago." "You look very healthy now," I observed. "Father Matthias saved me, healed me. All I had to do was say yes." Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Just like you will, Agent Boyer." Kristen's hand moved to her gun. "How do you know his name?" "We all know his name now, the dying man who hunts monsters. But he's becoming one of us, isn't he? The cancer spreading, the pain growing. Soon he'll be desperate enough to accept salvation." The temperature around us dropped suddenly. Michelle's breath came out in visible puffs, but she didn't seem to notice the cold. "What did Father Matthias do to you?" I demanded. "He introduced me to my new family, my brothers and sisters in service to the Great Hunger." Her voice was changing, becoming deeper, more resonant. "We are the chosen, the healed, the blessed, and we feed him well." Michelle's skin began to darken, taking on an ashen gray color. Her fingernails extended into claws, and when she opened her mouth, I could see rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Run," I told Kristen. The thing that had been Michelle lunged at us with inhuman speed. I drew my gun and fired 3 rounds center mass, but the bullets passed through her like she was made of smoke. She tackled Kristen to the ground, claws raking across my partner's jacket. Kristen rolled away and came up firing, her shots also having no effect. "What is this thing?" Michelle laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "We are Legion. We are hunger. We are the price of miracles." A new voice cut through the night air, deep, commanding, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "Enough." A figure emerged from the church shadows, tall, gaunt, wearing traditional priest's robes. This had to be Father Matthias. As he approached, Michelle immediately backed away, her form solidifying again. "Forgive Michelle," the priest said, his voice warm and grandfatherly. "The transition can be difficult for some. She's still learning to control the gifts she's received." "What kind of gifts?" Kristen kept her gun trained on Rebecca, though we'd seen how ineffective bullets were. "Life, Detective Gerard. Eternal life. Freedom from pain, from disease, from the suffering that plagues humanity." Father Matthias studied me with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. Though I suspect Agent Boyer understands suffering intimately. The pain in my abdomen chose that moment to flare up, and I couldn't suppress a grimace. Father Matthias smiled knowingly. "Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, isn't it? The doctors gave you 6 months, but you can feel it accelerating. The weight loss, the constant ache, the knowledge that every day brings you closer to a painful, undignified death." "How do you know that?" I managed through gritted teeth. "Because I offer hope to the hopeless, healing to the sick. Word spreads among the desperate Agent Boyer. They come to me when conventional medicine fails them." "And what do you ask in return?" Kristen demanded. "Only acceptance. Only a willingness to embrace a new kind of existence. Michelle here was dying of advanced breast cancer when she found me. Now look at her. Vibrant, healthy, eternal." Michelle smiled that disturbing smile again. "The hunger is small price to pay for life, Agent Boyer. And human flesh is surprisingly satisfying once you develop a taste for it." My stomach lurched. "You're feeding on people." "We're surviving," Father Matthias corrected. "The entities that grant these miracles require sustenance. A few lives to save many. Surely a man of your intelligence can see the logic in that exchange." "The serial killings," Kristen realized. "Your healed patients are the ones committing them." "They're gathering food for their new family," the priest confirmed. "Each host requires periodic feeding to maintain their enhanced state. It's a small price for immortality." Another figure emerged from the cemetery shadows, a man in his 30s with the same 2 perfect features as Michelle. Then another, an elderly woman with silver hair and predatory eyes. Soon we were surrounded by a dozen of Father Matthias's miracles, all watching us with hungry expressions. "You have a choice, Agent Boyer," the priest said gently. "You can leave here and die slowly, painfully, over the next few months. Watch the cancer consume you piece by piece while your partner grieves helplessly. Or you can say yes. Accept the gift. Join our family." The pain flared again, worse this time. I doubled over, fighting not to vomit. The cancer was definitely accelerating. I could feel it spreading like fire through my organs. "Don't listen to him," Kristen whispered. "There has to be another way." "Is there?" Father Matthias asked. "Your medical science has failed him. His own body is betraying him. But I can stop the cancer tonight. Make him stronger, faster, better than he ever was. All he has to do is say yes." One of the possessed stepped closer, a young man who couldn't have been more than 20. "I was dying of leukemia," he said softly. 2 weeks left when I came here. Now I'm forever young, forever strong. The hunger is nothing compared to the gift of eternal life." "What about the people you've killed?" I gasped, still fighting the pain. "What about the people you'll save?" Father Matthias countered. "With our gifts, you could continue your work indefinitely. Hunt monsters forever. Protect the innocent for centuries. Think of all the lives you could save, Agent Boyer." The offer was tempting, terrifyingly so. The pain was getting worse by the hour, and the thought of dying slowly while there was still so much evil in the world to fight. "The answer is no," I said firmly, straightening up despite the agony in my gut. "I won't become a monster to save myself." Father Matthias's expression didn't change, but something dark flickered behind his eyes. "How disappointing. I had hoped you would be more pragmatic." The possessed began closing in around us. Michelle's form started shifting again, becoming less human and more predatory. The young man's skin took on that ashen gray color, and his fingernails extended into claws. "Kill the woman," Father Matthias commanded. "But keep Boyer alive. Pain has a way of changing one's perspective." They moved as one, a coordinated pack of supernatural predators. Kristen and I stood back to back, guns drawn, knowing our bullets were useless but having no other options. That's when we heard the sound of engines roaring up the mountain road. Headlights cut through the darkness as 3 black SUVs skidded to a stop in front of the church. Armed figures in tactical gear poured out, weapons trained on the possessed. "Federal agents!" the team leader shouted through a megaphone. "Stand down immediately!" Father Matthias snarled, his composed mask finally slipping. "You brought backup." "I called for support before we came up here," I lied. Truth was, I had no idea who these people were. But I wasn't about to question good timing. The possessed scattered like startled animals, some disappearing into the forest, while others melted into shadow and vanished entirely. Father Matthias backed toward the church, his eyes blazing with inhuman rage. "This isn't over, Agent Boyer," he called out. "The cancer will kill you within the month now. When the pain becomes unbearable, you'll come back to me. They always do." He disappeared through the church doors, and moments later, the building began to glow with an unnatural green light. The tactical team's leader approached us, a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and cold blue eyes. "Agent Boyer? Commander Mina Morley, Special Operations Division. We've been tracking this entity for some time." "What entity?" Kristen asked. "The thing calling itself Father Matthias isn't human. It's an ancient demon that feeds on desperation and suffering. It offers false miracles to terminal patients, then uses their bodies as hosts for lesser demons." The church's green glow intensified, and we could hear chanting in that same unknown language John Bell had used. The sound made my teeth ache. "We need to evacuate the area," Commander Morley said urgently. "It's performing a summoning ritual, calling for reinforcements." As we raced down the mountain road, I caught a glimpse of the church in my side mirror. The entire building was now engulfed in sickly green flames that cast no heat, and shapes were moving in the smoke. Things that had never been human. "Dermont," Kristen said quietly as we reached the bottom of the mountain, "how much time do you really have left?" I touched my abdomen, feeling the tumor's malignant presence growing stronger. Father Matthias was right about one thing. The cancer's accelerating. I probably have weeks, not months. "Then we need to find another way to stop this thing," she said firmly, "before it claims any more victims." But I could still hear Father Matthias's words echoing in my mind. They always come back to me. And the horrible truth was, as the pain continued to worsen, part of me was starting to understand why. The weeks that followed our escape from Cedar Falls were a living nightmare. The cancer wasn't just advancing, it was consuming me like wildfire. Dr. Brendan had been wrong about the timeline. I didn't have weeks left. I had days, maybe hours. "Dermont, you need to get to a hospital," Kristen pleaded as I doubled over in the parking lot of our Denver field office. The pain was beyond description now, like molten metal being poured through my veins. Blood had started appearing in my urine, and I'd lost 23 pounds in 2 weeks. Please, let me call an ambulance. No hospitals, I gasped, fighting to stay conscious. Each breath felt like drowning in reverse, my lungs struggling to process oxygen as the tumors spread. We have work to finish. The mirror in my apartment bathroom told the story better than any medical scan. My skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and dark circles ringed my eyes like bruises. When I lifted my shirt, I could actually see the swelling in my abdomen where the cancer had metastasized. Commander Morley's team had been hunting Father Matthias for 3 years across 7 states. The entity wasn't just offering false cures, it was building an army. Every person it healed became a vessel for lesser demons, creating a network of supernatural killers that fed on human flesh. We've traced the pattern, Commander Morley explained during our briefing in a secure conference room beneath the Denver Federal Building. It establishes itself in remote locations, usually abandoned churches or monasteries. Spreads rumors about miraculous healings through online support groups for terminal patients. The photographs spread across the table painted a horrifying picture. Crime scenes from Oregon, Utah, New Mexico, all showing the same ritualistic murders, the same carved symbols, the same emptied bodies drained of blood and flesh. What exactly is it? Kristen asked, her face pale with exhaustion. She'd barely slept since Cedar Falls, spending every waking moment researching the case. Ancient entity called Baal Morrigan. Roughly translates to Lord of the Desperate. It's been doing this for centuries, offering false salvation to the dying, then using their bodies as breeding grounds for its demonic spawn. Commander Morley pulled up historical documents, medieval manuscripts, Victorian-era newspapers, modern missing persons reports. We've tracked similar patterns dating back to the Black Plague. The 1918 flu pandemic saw a massive spike in these incidents. During the AIDS crisis of the 1980s, we documented at least 40 cases in North America alone. I tried to focus on her words, but the pain was making it difficult to think clearly. My vision kept blurring, and I'd started experiencing breakthrough pain. Moments when the cancer's growth accelerated so rapidly that even my strongest medications couldn't keep up. How do we kill it? I managed to ask, gripping the edge of the table. That's the problem, Commander Morley said grimly. It's not truly physical. The priest form you saw is just a manifestation. The real entity exists partially in our dimension and partially in what our researchers call the hunger realm. To destroy it permanently, someone would need to cross over and face it on its home ground. And how exactly would someone do that? There's an artifact. Ancient ceremonial necklace with a black-green stone called the Nexus of Binding. Baal Morrigan uses it to anchor itself to our reality and to bind the souls of its victims. If someone could destroy the stone while in direct contact with the entity... She paused, meeting my eyes. The dimensional backlash would likely kill anyone in the immediate vicinity. It would be a suicide mission. That evening, I sat in my empty apartment staring at the bottle of morphine pills Dr. Brendan had prescribed. The cancer was in my bones now, my liver, my lungs. Every breath was a struggle, every movement agony. My phone buzzed with a text from my ex-wife, Sarah. Heard about your diagnosis. I'm sorry, Dermont. If you need anything... I deleted the message without responding. What could I possibly say? That I was dying alone in a government apartment, hunting monsters while my own body betrayed me? But then I thought about Michelle Pungay, trapped in her own body while something monstrous wore her face and committed atrocities in her name. I thought about all the other victims, past and future, who would suffer if Baal Morrigan continued its reign of terror. That night, I made my decision. I left Kristen sleeping in her hotel room and drove back toward Cedar Falls alone. The pain was constant now, and I'd already started hallucinating. Seeing shadows moving in my peripheral vision, hearing whispers in that unknown language. The drive took 4 hours, and by the time I reached the mountain road, I was running on pure determination. I'd brought everything. My service weapon, backup magazines, the experimental devices Commander Morley had shown us, and a small explosive charge designed to disrupt supernatural energy patterns. I was dying anyway. At least this way, my death might mean something. The church looked different in the pre-dawn darkness. The Gothic architecture seemed more alien, as if the building itself was slowly transforming into something that had never been meant for human worship. Green light pulsed from within like a diseased heartbeat. I parked at the base of the mountain and began the painful climb on foot. Every step was agony, but I forced myself to keep moving. Somewhere behind me, I could hear engines. Kristen had discovered my absence and called for backup. But they'd be too late. The possessed were waiting for me along the path. They emerged from the shadows like nightmares given flesh. Michelle Pinguet with her too perfect features and predatory smile. The young man with leukemia whose skin had taken on that ashen gray pallor. An elderly woman whose silver hair whipped around her face. Agent Boyer! Michelle's voice was a harmony of whispers, as if multiple entities were speaking through her throat. The Master has been expecting you. He can smell the death on you, the desperation growing stronger with each passing hour. He offers you salvation, the young man added. Eternal life. Freedom from pain. All you have to do is say yes. I drew my weapon, knowing it would be useless but needing the comfort of its weight. Get out of my way. They laughed in unison, a sound like breaking glass mixed with dying screams. Bullets cannot harm us, dying man. We are beyond such mortal concerns. I know, I said, and kept walking. To my surprise, they let me pass. They simply stood there watching as I climbed the final stretch to the church. I could feel them following at a distance, herding me toward whatever fate awaited inside. Father Matthias was waiting for me in the church doorway, no longer bothering with his grandfatherly facade. His skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and his eyes glowed with that same sickly green light. The priest's robes hung on his gaunt frame like funeral shrouds. Agent Boyer, he said, his voice echoing with inhuman harmonics. I knew you'd return. The pain has become unbearable, hasn't it? The cancer spreading through your liver, your lungs, your brain. Soon, you'll be nothing but agony wrapped in dying flesh. I'm here to stop you, I said, though my voice came out as barely a whisper. He laughed, a sound like breaking bones. Stop me? You can barely stand. Look at what you've become. He gestured, and suddenly I could see my reflection in the church's stained glass windows. A walking corpse, hollowed out by disease. My clothes hung loose on my skeletal frame, and my skin had taken on the waxy pallor of the dying. But I can end your suffering tonight, Father Matthias continued. Make you strong again. Give you the power to hunt monsters for eternity. Imagine it. No more pain, no more weakness. As he spoke, his form began to shift. The human mask fell away completely, revealing something ancient and terrible. His skin became leathery and gray, stretched tight over a skeletal frame that was too tall, too angular. His fingers extended into claws, and when he smiled, I saw rows of needle-sharp teeth. But it was the necklace that drew my attention, a thick chain of tarnished silver holding a stone that seemed to absorb light itself. The gem was the size of a human heart, black with veins of poisonous green that pulsed in rhythm with my own dying heartbeat. Do you see it, Agent Boyer? Bale Morrigan gestured to the stone. The nexus of binding. Through this artifact, I maintain my hold on this realm and on the souls I've claimed. Your friend Michelle Pinguet? She's still screaming inside her possessed body, watching helplessly as her hands tear apart innocent victims. They all are. Every soul I've claimed over the centuries, trapped forever in an eternal hunger they can never satisfy. The horror of it hit me like a physical blow. All those people seeking healing, seeking hope, and instead finding themselves imprisoned in their own bodies while demons used them as puppets. I can hear them, Bale Morrigan continued. Right now they're crying out for release. But their torment feeds me, Agent Boyer. Their despair gives me strength. Every scream, every plea for mercy, it all flows into me through the nexus. You're a monster, I managed to say. I am survival, it corrected. I am adaptation. I am what humanity becomes when it stops pretending that death is natural. I offer evolution, Agent Boyer, a chance to transcend the limitations of mortal flesh. The choice is simple, the entity continued, circling me like a predator. Accept my gift and join them willingly, retaining some semblance of your identity. You could continue hunting monsters forever, protecting the innocent across centuries, or die here, slowly and painfully, while I find another dying soul to corrupt. As it spoke, I could feel the cancer spreading further through my body. My vision was starting to fade at the edges, and blood was trickling from my nose. "There's a third option," I said, pulling out my service weapon with a shaking hand. Bale Morrigan laughed. "Bullets cannot harm me, Agent Boyer. I am not truly here. This form is merely a projection." "I know," I replied. And pressed the gun to my own temple. The entity's expression changed instantly. "What are you doing?" "You need me to say yes," I realized. "You can't just take someone. They have to accept your offer willingly. That's why you wait until they're desperate. Free will is the key, isn't it? Some cosmic law you can't break." "Put down the weapon," Bale Morrigan snarled. "You cannot escape me through death. I will find another host, another vessel. Your sacrifice will be meaningless. Maybe, but not me, and not today." That's when I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. Helicopters approaching from the valley below. Commander Morley's tactical team, supported by whatever other federal resources she'd managed to commandeer. They'd brought heavy weapons, experimental technology designed specifically for supernatural threats. Through the church windows, I could see repelling lines dropping from the aircraft, armed figures in tactical gear sliding down to surround the building. Kristen would be with them. I knew her well enough to know she wouldn't stay behind. "Your cavalry arrives too late," Bale Morrigan hissed. "I will scatter my children across the continent. By the time your people locate them all, hundreds more will have been turned." "Actually," I said, forcing a smile, "they're right on time." The entity spun around as armed figures burst through the church doors. But I wasn't watching them. I was watching Kristen, who had somehow made it up the mountain ahead of the main team, and was now crouched behind a stone pillar with a rifle trained on the creature. She caught my eye and nodded once. Her weapon wasn't loaded with standard ammunition. Commander Morley had given her something special, bullets forged from blessed silver and inscribed with protective wards. "Now!" I shouted. Kristen fired a single shot, not at Bale Morrigan, but at the stone around its neck. The bullet struck the nexus of binding dead center. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The stone cracked with a sound like reality tearing apart, and streams of green energy began pouring out of the fissures. Bale Morrigan shrieked in rage and pain as its anchor to our dimension began to collapse. But the entity wasn't finished. With a gesture that seemed to bend space around its claws, it summoned its possessed servants. Michelle Pingay burst through the church windows in an explosion of glass and shadow, her eyes blazing with inhuman hunger. The young man with leukemia materialized from darkness itself, his claws extended. A dozen others appeared around the church, all moving with supernatural speed toward the tactical team. "Protect the Nexus!" Commander Morley shouted over the chaos. "Don't let them repair the binding!" Gunfire erupted throughout the church as the tactical team engaged the possessed. Their specialized ammunition was more effective than standard bullets, but they were still outnumbered and facing enemies that felt no pain. I forced myself to stand, every movement sending waves of agony through my body. The experimental device Commander Morley had given me, a small explosive charge designed to disrupt supernatural energy patterns, was still in my jacket pocket. "Hey!" I called out to Bale Morrigan, which was trying to repair the damaged stone with streams of green energy flowing from its claws. "You want a desperate soul? You want someone who'll say yes to anything to stop the pain?" The entity turned toward me, hope flickering in its inhuman eyes. "I accept," I said clearly. "I accept your gift." "Dermont, no!" Kristen screamed from across the church. But I wasn't accepting salvation. I was accepting damnation, willingly, knowingly, for one specific purpose. As Bale Morrigan reached out with its claws to claim my soul, abandoning its attempts to repair the nexus of binding, I grabbed the cracked stone with both hands. The moment my flesh touched the damaged artifact, I felt the full weight of the entity's true form pressing against my mind. I was suddenly aware of the Hunger Realm, a dimension of endless darkness and insatiable appetite, and I felt the trapped souls, hundreds of them, thousands of them, screaming for release from their eternal torment. "You cannot destroy me," the entity raged, its claws digging into my shoulders. I am eternal. I am hunger itself. Maybe, I gasped, feeling my consciousness being pulled into the stone. But I can take you with me. Using the last of my strength, I pulled the pin from the experimental grenade and pressed it against the cracked nexus of binding. As the blessed silver and consecrated explosive detonated against the damaged stone, I felt the dimensional barrier collapse entirely. The explosion tore through both realms simultaneously. I felt Bail Morrigan's scream of rage and terror as it was pulled back into the hunger realm, its anchor to our reality severed forever. All around the church, the possessed suddenly collapsed, as the demons controlling them were banished back to whatever hell had spawned them. But I was being pulled along with them, my soul caught in the dimensional vortex. As my consciousness faded, I felt the trapped souls rushing past me like a river of light, finally free after centuries of imprisonment. Michelle Pinguet's spirit touched mine briefly as she passed, whispering thank you, before disappearing into whatever afterlife awaited her. The last thing I saw was Kristen running toward my burning body, tears streaming down her face. Then darkness claimed me, and I fell between worlds. I expected to find myself in the hunger realm, trapped forever with the entity I'd destroyed. Instead, I found myself standing in a place of impossible beauty, a realm of golden light and perfect peace where pain was just a memory. And there, waiting for me, were all the souls Bail Morrigan had claimed over the centuries. "Welcome, Agent Boyer," said Michelle Pinguet, though she now appeared as she had before the cancer, before the desperation that had led her to the false healer. "We've been waiting to thank you." "Am I dead?" I asked. "The cancer killed your body minutes after the explosion," she confirmed gently. "But your soul is free. Free to move on, free to find peace. You saved us all." I looked around at the hundreds of grateful faces surrounding me, people who had been trapped in an eternal nightmare, now finally able to rest. "What about the others? Kristen? The investigation?" "The entity is gone forever," Michelle assured me. "Its children scattered and weakened without their master. Commander Morley's people will hunt down the remaining possessed and free them. Your partner will grieve, but she'll continue the work. She's stronger than you know." As the golden light began to intensify around me, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The pain was gone, not just the cancer, but all the accumulated trauma of decades spent fighting monsters. The fear was gone. The desperate need to battle evil was replaced by a sense of completion. "One more thing," I said to Michelle as we prepared to move on to whatever lay beyond. "If other entities like Bail Morrigan ever threaten innocent people, then we'll be ready," she promised. And I saw that same determination in the eyes of all the freed souls around us. Death isn't the end for souls like ours, Agent Boyer. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a different kind of mission. I smiled as the light enveloped me completely. Somewhere in the world of the living, Kristen would continue hunting monsters with the knowledge that some battles were worth any price.